This one right here goes out to all the students out there in the science fair, doing the science projects. In the mom's minivan, put this in the CD player and bump this. Mr. Duey exclusive, all about the scientific method. Watch this. Mr. Duey, run through the steps of the scientific method. First thing you have to do is to ask a question. Start with why, when, how, who, where, what, or which. When you're asking a question about something you're observing, get a question, make sure it's something you can measure, preferably with the number to work with. You heard me. Find an internet connection, use a library server. And now it's time for a little background researching. Put a plan together to answer what you're searching for. Check to see if anyone has done it before, and if it took place, learn from the mistakes, if any were made, that they recorded. Write them down, ignore them. Moving forward to the next step, come up with the educated guess that's answering your question. Predict the results from the experiment, that's called the hypothesis. Like if I do this and this will happen. Scientific method, you ask questions, do some research, come up with the hypothesis and test it. Then you take the data and you analyze it, come to the conclusion whether your hypothesis was right or was. Scientific method, you ask questions, do some research, come up with the hypothesis and test it. Then you take the data and you analyze it, come to the conclusion whether your hypothesis was right or was. Test a hypothesis by doing an experiment. Prove if your hypothesis was spot on or you didn't get it. Make sure your data you're getting matches up when you finish. Your hypothesis has to have an experiment that's legitimate. Don't do it once, do it over and over again. Take the data, reel it in, make a graph and fill it in. On your computer, write it down or use a paper with pen. Whatever you choose, the data results is what will prove it. What you thought was false or true, and you write it down, that's when you find what we call the conclusion. That's all there is to it. Third verse, an example of the scientific method in 5 steps. Watch me run through it. Scientific method, you ask questions, do some research, come up with the hypothesis and test it. Then you take the data and you analyze it, come to the conclusion whether your hypothesis was right or was. Scientific method, you ask questions, do some research, come up with the hypothesis and test it. Then you take the data and you analyze it, come to the conclusion whether your hypothesis was right or was. Question, do students do better on the test while playing my track about the scientific method? I did some background research, music helps learning. Think about it, how do people learn the alphabet letters? My hypothesis, if kids keep playing this, then they'll memorize the facts for the test that they're taking. My experiment began with the pre-test. The children got D's and F's. Put the CD on this track and I played it. I got them rocking back to front with their hands up waving. A week straight, I played it to them 3 times daily. On that Friday, tossed another test and wait, what do I see? Straight A's, so amazing. And with the great improvement from the data that I gathered, I found my hypothesis was proven. So I wrote my hypothesis true in the conclusion. I run through it, there's nothing to it. That's how Mr. Duey do it with this Mr. Duey exclusive on the scientific method. You ask questions, do some research, come up with the hypothesis and test it.